I've now studied dozens of examples where causes which in a way were less attractive and or smaller and or less resourced than bigger ones have succeeded, for instance, in winning large grants or large partnerships or large major gifts. It doesn't always happen, but I've noticed it happens enough for me to have studied these patterns. Broadly, there are two things that they do differently. Many people have heard you and I and others talk about the value of conversations, and even somehow to get a conversation or event attendance up, picking up the phone is a tactic available to us. And yet you and I just do also know that there's a little voice in your head that would persuade you not to do it. If you translate this to fundraising, there are some things that, left to our own devices, many people who work in charities are less likely to do. Hello and welcome to the Fundraising Bright Spots podcast. This is episode 177. My name's Rob Woods, and this is the show for fundraisers who want ideas and maybe a dose of inspiration to help you raise more money and really enjoy your job. This time we are joined by my good friend and colleague Ben Swart. Ben, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you, Rob. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. And this time there's a topic that feels sort of ever-present, really, or certainly a challenge that feels ever-present. And you and I, over the years, have noticed this pattern that some fundraisers and some charities seem to face this challenge and yet overcome it. What was the key topic we wanted to talk about?
Do you know, Rob, when I go out and work with charities, often I get feedback on the pod, and one of the things that they like most is that the themes connect with their own worries. And this is a worry that I think keeps coming up again and again and again. And for many people that I work with, they feel like, especially at the moment, that they feel like the odds are just against them in lots of different ways. And what I like most is whenever you and I catch up and on other courses, I think they're not the only people feeling like that, and you've got some interesting ways to help them. But just tell me, this concept of feeling like every day, everything I do, the cause I work with or for, the odds are stacked against me. Tell me a bit more about that, Rob.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say is no fundraising is easy, even if you work for what some might call an easier cause, because it's a disease that many people get, or it's, maybe for some children's charities, we could say in a way is easier to raise money for because many people get it. Actually, fundraising for any of those topics is still really hard. I get that. It is also true, I think, that some causes just are more niche, and either because of the size of your charity or because you work for a cause which is frankly not universally popular. Maybe the ethos of the organisation is contrary to how the establishment or sections of the media seem to be messaging. There are some causes which really you are absolutely more of an underdog, and the odds are heavily stacked against your proposal being looked on favourably by those types of funders or those kinds of companies and so on. And over the years, I've noticed that whilst absolutely, if you are an underdog charity, it's really hard, I've always been fascinated that in spite of those odds, there are always some where the odds appear to be stacked against them, and yet still that somehow they came through and they fundraised extremely effectively to an extent that many are surprised by. And I've been so interested in that pattern for years that I have always lent into it and studied them when I could, to see if when that happens, they are doing certain things that help them make the most of their strengths, so that somewhat the odds are equalised, or even, dare I say it, sometimes even turned in their favour because of what they choose to do strategically.
I love that, Rob. And perhaps the most well-known underdog story is that of David versus Goliath, which I get a sense isn't quite what it seems, which forms a part of this whole study. What would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember maybe I was age 7 or 8 and I was at primary school, and whether it was in assembly or whether it was in class, I was first told this story from the Bible about David and Goliath. And from that moment on, I had a certain view about what happens when things are mismatched. And about 15 years ago, I read a book which reframed my understanding of that story. So Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called David and Goliath, and it's all about how rebels and misfits and underdogs somehow managed to overcome the odds. And I read this book about 15 years ago, and I liked it so much that, coupled with the examples I'd been noticing in fundraising, I decided to write my own book based on some of Gladwell's observations and ideas, and about how certain fundraisers had applied those same patterns and equalised the odds and raised money in spite of those odds. So I've been interested in it ever since then. My starting point is with a couple of Gladwell's points. To this day, if in the media or in a conversation someone talks about a David and Goliath story, I can't remember the team, but a couple of months ago in the UK, in the sports media, in the Men's FA Cup, there was a lower division team that beat a team either in the top flight or the second flight of English football. And definitely in the media, they use this phrase, David and Goliath story. And for me, what that tends to mean is a notion of a plucky underdog fighting hard, refusing to give in, and somehow things went their way against the odds. It's your classic Rocky story, I guess, for people who've ever seen those films. And when I read Gladwell's book, he helped me see the original story as actually a little bit different from that. So that's my starting point. What happened was, definitely, say most historians, there was an incident. There was a battle between a massive, heavily armed, skillful warrior named Goliath on one side and a shepherd boy named David on the other. It happened thousands of years ago on the plains of Elah. The massive warrior strolled down onto the plain and he challenged someone from the Israelite army to come and face him in hand-to-hand combat. There were no volunteers forthcoming from the Israelite army, so David, who was not a trained soldier, he was a boy who was a shepherd, he volunteered to go and do this fight. So generally speaking, historians agree that this happened. What's different, Gladwell tells me, is where the mismatch lay. When they told it to me in assembly, I had the impression that the sling that David used in the battle was kind of a little more than an upgrade on a child's catapult that would be useful for flinging stones in the direction of wolves or something and scaring them away, and that's what he used. Whereas what I now understand is that for thousands of years, many armies have included an artillery division. In some countries, that's largely bow and arrow, archers. And in many other countries, parts of the world, that's always been mostly people with a slingshot. And in classic warfare, you always had cavalry, infantry, and artillery. So slingers have always been a valuable part of an army and a very definite military weapon rather than something that only shepherds use to scare away some wolves. What's really interesting is just how devastating a weapon it is. So modern day ballistics experts studying this weapon suggest that it's unbelievably powerful, to the extent that if you were skilled in the use of this weapon and you were 40 meters away, as potentially David was from Goliath, and you flung a stone, maybe the size of a golf ball, but much heavier, because it's a stone, it's dense. If David had used that skillfully from 40 meters away, the stone would have hit Goliath's forehead at 150 miles an hour. Broadly, says the ballistics expert, that's the equivalent stopping power to a modern day handgun. Absolutely, that would knock you out and certainly knock you over. And secondly, people who were skillful with this weapon, though it takes time to practice, you could be extremely accurate. There are medieval paintings of people using slingshots to go hunting to take out birds in flight. That's how accurate they could be. And so again, say the military historians, it's entirely reasonable that from a distance of 40 metres, someone skilled in this weapon would have both power and accuracy at their disposal. Broadly speaking, on that fateful day on the plain of Elah, there was a massive mismatch. The odds were stacked against someone, but the moment the shepherd boy chose not to do as he was told and everyone else expected, to stride down towards the giant warrior and face him in hand-to-hand combat, the moment he chose not to do what others expected of him, but he chose his own strategy that suited his strengths, he held back to a distance of 30 or 40 metres and he used what was at his disposal. Absolutely, he was the favourite. Goliath was the massive underdog, and really there was only one outcome likely to happen. That is what I now understand to have happened on that fateful day on the plains of Elah.
Fundraisers might feel like they've stumbled upon the Rest is Politics or the Rest is Conflict podcast, but I promise you, this is the Fundraising Bright Spots podcast. Rob, I'm interested. What is it that fundraising underdogs you've noticed are thinking or doing differently? How does this transfer?
Okay, I've now studied dozens of examples where causes which in a way were less attractive and or smaller and or less resourced than bigger ones have succeeded, for instance, in winning large grants or large partnerships or large major gifts. It doesn't always happen, but I've noticed it happens enough for me to have studied these patterns. Broadly, there are two things that they do differently. One thing they do differently is in terms of being willing to what I would call full court press, by which I mean do things that most other charities don't do. The Gladwell books talks about a tactic for winning a basketball game if you are less skillful than your opponent. And broadly, whereas in almost all basketball games, after a basket is scored, the team retreats back to their end of the court and the team that's now got the ball throws it in and off we go. The full court press is where you don't retreat after scoring. You stay in the opposition third of the court and you defend heavily, making it really hard for them to throw in. And Gladwell tells an example of how a team of 12-year-old girls who were mostly less skillful than many of their opponents, they ended up with an unbelievably high win rate because they mastered the art of the full court press. Interestingly, well, if it's so likely to help you win, why doesn't everyone full court press and defend the whole of the basketball court? And this is the crux, because it's really hard work. You have to be unbelievably fit. If you've got fewer resources in things like skill, but you want to win, you can full court press, but you have to be really, really, really fit to do so because it's exhausting. And that is why most people don't do it. If you translate this to fundraising, there are some things that left to our own devices, many people who work in charities are less likely to do. And an example of those, I know this is a topic close to your heart, Ben, from our recent Breakfast Club. One story I remember from our podcast is with the brilliant Cleo Grisani, who was on our Major Gifts Mastery programme and went and implemented many of the ideas with her team when she worked at Shelterbox. And on our programme, she shared with the group that during one of the lockdowns, she had done an event to engage and inspire their supporters. And at the time, various fundraisers were talking to me about Zoom fatigue. And I'm not sure we should be trying to do this because no one wants another Zoom call. Do they really, Rob? And Cleo talked about her event, which had had a target to get 40 people showing up for this inspiring call about Shelterbox's work. And they managed to get 62, not just 40, on the call. And anyone who knows about fundraising and how funnels work knows that that extra beyond your target showing up right there can only have positive effects down the line for potential actual income helping your bottom line. How did Cleo and her team do it? They all made phone calls in addition to the email invitations they were sending. Interestingly, several of her team didn't want to. They were reluctant. They even came up with rational sounding reasons why it was not possible or desirable or appropriate. But as Cleo said, we've got GDPR permission. Trust me, they did the calls. Lots of people appreciated their calls. They signed up to the event. The reason I'm saying this is many people have heard you and I and others talk about the value of conversations, and even somehow to get a conversation or event attendance up, picking up the phone is a tactic available to us. And yet you and I just do also know that there's a little voice in your head that would persuade you not to do it. It is harder than starting your day sending some emails. So it's not such a creative thing that underdogs do to get such wonderful results. So often what makes the difference is they are willing to do things which are obvious in a way, but are hard and take more willpower.
I love that, Rob. Two really quick examples come to mind. One of them is somebody who confessed they work for a very big and well-known organisation, where she said, in our team, sometimes it is okay to be reactive because people literally are knocking on our door wanting to give. And so sometimes they don't feel like they need to pick up the phone. I would argue otherwise, but whatever. Comparing that with someone I talked to a few weeks ago who works for a more obscure sort of wildlife charity, but has seen extraordinary results. And she proudly showed me in her diary the time she blocks out to pick up the phone and call and connect and have conversations with donors. And I love the full court press in her world. Wasn't every single item on her to-do list. It was very deliberately in this area here to do with building conversations, picking up the phone and growing relationships with donors. And she had a lot of excellent examples of where donors who you might not consider to be supporters of that sort of cause have ended up giving six-figure gifts from, you know, the odd early £1,000 or £2,000 gift. And she's adamant it's because of how hard we work picking up the phone and trying to build relationships with them.
Hi, Rob here, and I want to let you know about the two exciting masterclasses we've got coming up this summer. The first one, Influencing Donors and Supporters, is all about how to grow fundraising results by helping people connect to the amazing difference your charity makes. It's especially for anyone who works in high value, corporate, community or events fundraising. But frankly, the ideas will help any fundraiser find and communicate inspiring, persuasive messages about your cause. The second one is Writing to Influence, and it's things I wish I'd known 25 years ago about writing as a fundraiser. To give you a sense of the difference these techniques can make, here's Shelley Thompson, Head of New Partnerships at Oxfam, talking about the courses we did with her team.
Things are harder now. The no unsolicited application and the closed doors are every way we're turning, as far as I'm concerned, in my team specifically as New Partnerships. And when we did Bright Spot training, it was like, this is a different way to approach something. And it's not hugely time laborious. It's just very smart, different ways of approaching something that you need to allow yourself to give the time to. But when you do, it makes a difference. And the results that we're getting from that are something our team specifically has not seen in a very long time. I know that it's tens of thousands just in my team, and I know that it's tens of thousands in our mirroring development team as well. That is definitely worth it, and we're not even a year after the training yet.
To be clear, these masterclasses only happen once a year. Both courses are in person in London. The Influencing Donors and Supporters Masterclass is on Tuesday the 24th of June, and the Writing to Influence Masterclass is on Thursday the 10th of July. I do appreciate, dear listener, that because of where you are in the world, it may not be practical or even possible to make it to London for an in-person masterclass. But if you're in the UK and you sense that one of these one-off events would help you, be aware that there is an early bird discount which saves you £100. So do check out the details on our website at brightspotfundraising.co.uk/services. Yes, great examples, Ben. And one of the reasons you and I chose to talk about this topic today is a really live issue for us, is just how well a certain charity has been doing in the corporate partnerships space. And one reason it really leaps out at me as relevant today is I remember an episode of this podcast we did with the brilliant Sarah Jane O'Neill, which is about raising money for unpopular causes. And apparently Sarah Jane's master's thesis at the University of Kent looked at why certain causes are massively underfunded. And in particular, she studied why it is that causes to do with women's domestic violence are underfunded. And on that episode, Sarah Jane shares various tactics that have worked for her in her career for when you are an unpopular cause. So I do recommend the listener might check out that episode as well. But knowing that data, you and I find it even more interesting, the successes that a particular charity's been winning recently. And I think you were saying to me that part of how they do it is they're willing to do those hard yards.
Thank you, Rob. Yes, and keen listeners might note that we are referencing the charity Refuge, who, if you're interested to learn a bit more, Katie, who is one of the leaders in the team, was on the podcast. I think it was episode number 174. So she'll talk about lots of things they did there. But one of them where she sort of full court pressed was when it was their turn to pitch for one of their biggest partnerships that they've ever pitched for, actually. She worked so much harder to try and shrink down the amount of content that she was putting into the presentation. I think she only had 20 minutes to be able to pitch to them. And I know we talk about this, Rob, when we talk in pitch craft and presenting craft. One of the trickiest things is figuring out what not to put in. And Katie worked so hard, and her team worked so hard to ask themselves the question, out of everything we could say, what are the one or two or at most three things that are most likely to have this company choose us as their partner? And even though there were so many logical reasons why other things could get involved in the pitch and other things were added to the list, and I was working with them on this pitch, even though there were so many other things they could talk about, one of the key messages was just how either underfunded, underrepresented, or how we are a cause where it feels like the odds are against us. Because she knew, because the funder had talked it through with her, she knew this was one of the reasons why the funder was interested.
I'm sure there were lots of things, but what's another thing that springs to mind for you about doing the hard thing?
You know, just choices she made on who she would involve in the pitch, and also how early she included them. So for her, it was about a choice of a particular person with lived experience of their cause. And I appreciate not everyone listening will be able to get people with lived experience of their cause to either be involved in a pitch or they even have them at all. One of the key messages that they knew would help influence the panel was getting this story across. Katie, very early on, she involved the person with lived experience who was an absolutely incredible woman, but she involved her really in the early planning stages. Like, how would you like to be involved? What is it that you might want to say? Is this something you'd like to do? So even before the pitch had been written, she was involved, which then meant during practices, she was there. And then on the day, I can tell you the difference between having her speak and her point of view and her experience and her stories, like just how powerful that was compared to earlier on brainstorms when we said, could we get this across with a video? Or Katie, what if it's easier for you to just share the story yourself? Like at the time, those seemed like a powerful way to do it. But I can tell you, when you watched her speak with lived experience, like towards the end in the final pitch, it was breathtaking. And without a doubt, it was one of the main reasons why the panel picked Refuge. And rewind the clock, I think it was because of how hard Katie and the team had worked earlier on in the process to help that voice with someone with lived experience to be part of it. That's for me their version of full court press.
Yes, great example. And it's not only being willing to do things that others won't. In most of these stories, there are also examples of underdog charities or underdog fundraisers doing things slightly differently compared to what they were expected to do. And there's several examples of that in this same success story.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. You know, they wouldn't have even got the chance to pitch if Katie hadn't been slightly unconventional in her approach to them. They're the sort of company who has a cycle for when they open up their applications. And I know had even said to the likes of Katie and other charities, you don't need to contact us, we'll contact you. She said, I didn't hesitate. in the same way that Sarah Jane in her research said this sort of cause is just underrepresented, for some reason, I just got in touch with them through LinkedIn, a direct message to them, and just said, we are an underrepresented cause in lots of places. And when I've looked, in your partnerships too. Like, I think you might know this, but I'd love to talk to you about it. Can we have a chat? And she said, I got a chat with him. And from that point on, that's where it went. And if you are interested, one of the key messages of the pitch was how underrepresented they were, but that the company were interested in supporting them because of that. But for her, Rob, the energy Katie had because she tried that route and it had worked. I love that, especially as so many fundraisers would wait for the application process to be live or would do what the funder said and we'll get back in touch with you in 6 months' time. I like how she bucked that trend. And in her words, my favourite part of the sentence, I did not hesitate, Ben. I didn't overthink it. I just wrote this message.
Yeah, I love this, not least because of that energizing effect it has when you make one move that might not be a great long hard slog. It might just take 10 seconds of courage and making a bold move, and suddenly the whole game can feel different. So lots of successful charities that manage to, quote, overachieve compared to expectation, a thing they do is they do things a little differently. Not everything. You can't be able to be creative every single day, but often in these success stories, there's something different that they do. And we've got lots of examples, especially, for instance, when we teach this in our courses about the wow moment approach. And one example that really stands out to me is with Stephanie and Adam talking about the charity Switchboard, which is not a huge charity, but for, I guess, nearly 3 decades, it has provided a wonderful helpline for the LGBTQIA plus community. And they really do punch above their weight in terms of making an impact. Interestingly, a key way they help their community is through this helpline, by being able to answer calls and listen and encourage. And for a lot of the early years, I think it was probably quite hard to always manage to get that volunteer roster full and be able to make all the shifts, with understandable implications on answering all the calls. And for the last 7 or 8 years or so, as I understand it, they've massively improved their ability to find volunteers and therefore achieve their mission and provide this service. What did it take? Was it lots of astonishingly skillful fundraising applications or corporate partners? Well, they're no slouches. They're perfectly good at raising funds as well. But the lion's share of how they've solved this problem in terms of volunteering is with a podcast. So there are 3 seasons now of the podcast called The Logbooks. And about 8-10 years ago, Adam Smith and his colleague started creating this podcast, which made use of the logbooks, which for years have contained the summaries of various calls that have been made to the helpline. And it just so happens that it makes for an amazing, edgy, entertaining podcast, which has won awards. Almost all of the volunteers that now come along to Stephanie's charity and offer to help are long-term fans of the podcast. And it's drawn them in, it's entertained them, it's helped them understand the cause. And long story short, there are a few things they possibly could have done to improve their ability to fulfill their mission that could have been as powerful as making use of this asset, these logbooks, and creating a hit podcast.
I love it, Rob. So I'm interested, if I am a listener who might feel like I am in that sort of smaller organisation or the odds are against my cause, are there any last things you'd want to leave them with, or ideas or actions to help them most after this pod finishes?
Yeah, there is something, Ben, and me saying it doesn't make it easy. It will remain hard, but honestly, there is an answer to your question. Wherever you work, whether it's a kind of cause that some would say is relatively easier or some would say is relatively hard, either way, if you feel the odds are against you in your job, There are many things you could do, but my default one would be when you come in the morning and 9 fundraisers out of 10 are sort of easing into their job and answering some emails and so on. What I've observed the most successful underdog fundraisers do is right from the get-go in the morning, in addition to planning their day, and as Jumar Johnson said on another show, thinking about what are the most valuable things I could do, so the thinking of it. What fundraisers do who are more successful in equalising the odds is they choose to do more things which add value to relationships with people who care about their cause, and they do them earlier in the day. Quite a lot of fundraisers put those things on their to-do list and intend to do them at some point. But if you feel like you're David rather than Goliath, it's this kind of cause or you're up against it for whatever reason, almost every morning you do have an opportunity to turn the odds somewhat in your favour by doing those valuable things. For instance, picking up the phone and saying thank you to your most valuable existing supporters, or as Katie Hillett did, reaching out proactively to your most valuable potential funders and trying to start or continue a conversation with them, adding value to the relationship. It's knowing those things and doing them earlier in the day that, frankly, is available to most of us most days. I appreciate that knowing that doesn't suddenly make it easy. Those are choices one has available to oneself, notwithstanding you have a team meeting sometimes. But you have that available to you as a choice on most days you come in to work.
I love that, Rob.
Thank you to everyone listening to our ideas about options available to you. I appreciate it doesn't make it easy. It's still hard when the odds are against you, but I hope the ideas we've shared today will help you potentially somehow hang in there and do certain things to increase your chances of winning or raising that money. Ben, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks, Rob.
Well, I hope you found our ideas helpful today. As we always do, we'll put a summary in the episode notes on the podcast section of our Bright Spot website. If you haven't already subscribed to our show, do click that button now. You will get instant access to dozens more techniques and ideas to help you with your fundraising, including several more great episodes with Ben. As I'm recording this, I am super excited about the batch of Bright Spot stories I'm going to be sharing in the next few weeks. So please don't miss out on the chance to receive those straight away when we release them. Remember, if you find this podcast, my books, webinars, or our Breakfast Club helpful, and you're curious about the difference it would make if we went deeper and could help your whole team, then please do get in touch to request a chat. If you work in major donor or corporate fundraising, our flagship programs, Major Gifts Mastery and Corporate Partnerships Mastery, will boost your confidence and help you transform your results. Or if you're the leader of a team, our public masterclasses in influencing and writing skills and our bespoke team training days are a powerful way to boost your fundraising results. To find out more or request a chat, go to brightspotfundraising.co.uk/services. And if you liked today's show and you think it would help other people, please do share it on with your colleagues and with other good causes through LinkedIn. Please let us know what you think. Ben and I are both on LinkedIn. Thank you ever so much for listening and supporting the Fundraising Bright Spot show. Whether or not you're feeling like an underdog today, best of luck with your fundraising, and I can't wait to share more encouraging stories with you very soon.